The Hambletonian Stakes and Hambletonian Oaks, the most prestigious harness races in North America, are being run at the Meadowlands Racetrack in New Jersey on Saturday, August 3rd. We interviewed legendary Hall of Fame driver and Hambletonian executive John Campbell, extraordinary trainer Gregory Peck, and Hall of Fame driver and Canadian harness racing executive Billy O'Donnell for their insight. So pleased today to have John Campbell, who is the current president and CEO of the Hambletonian Society. Amazing individual, and besides this executive position, he's probably one of the most decorated Hall of Fame standardbred drivers in the history of the sport. I'm not trying to embarrass you, but I got a list for my audience that doesn't know who you are. You retired, originally Canadian harness racing driver, now located in Jersey, I believe. Inducted into the Racing Hall of Fame, the Canadian Horse Racing Hall of Fame, and the Canada Sports Hall of Fame. You have the most Hambletonian wins by a driver, 6. You won the Yonkers Trot 3 times, and the most Kentucky Fury wins, 7 at the Red Mile. That composes the Standardbred Triple Crown for anyone that knows Triple Crown from thoroughbred racing. And purse money, you're the highest money earner to date, almost $300 million, which you could buy Krispy Kreme if you're on the political circuit for everyone with that kind of money. But we welcome you and thank you so much for taking so much of your precious time. I know the draw is coming up tomorrow. Tell me, this is the Hambletonian and the Hambletonian Oaks, sort of like the Derby and the Oaks are matched, and you have 3-year-olds, the best of this time in the country, competing in the Standardbred Mile at the fastest times. So how many do you have in your eliminations, and how many do you have in the finals of each division?
We had 26, I think, in our eliminations for the fillies, for the Oaks, and 20 for the colts. They were conducted last Saturday, and we had very competitive races, and it shakes out to be quite interesting. In the colts, TCI and Carl were the best 2-year-olds by quite a bit last year, and they matched up in the Breeders' Crown, and Carl won the Breeders' Crown. But this is kind of the matchup that everybody in harness racing has been anticipating since that time, and they both won their eliminations. They both were very impressive. So everything's shaking out to be a very exciting Hambletonian day at the Meadowlands on Saturday.
So people that aren't as familiar with standardbred racing compared to thoroughbred, much more durable horse. I mean, you had the eliminations literally a week ago, and they're racing back. In the old era, sometimes you had the eliminations the same day as the finals.
Yeah, we used to race heats. They used to race over 3 heats, sometimes 4 back in the day. But our horses have changed. They've gotten faster, but they still race quite a bit more often than the thoroughbreds do. And so it's not unusual for them to race back in a week. And they prep their schedules, the trainers and the owners. Hambletonian's on their wish list as soon as their horse starts training back in their 3-year-old year. So they space their starts out and hope to have that horse peak for the elimination and the final.
I don't like making comparisons of 2 different types of sports, but would it be fair to say your Hambletonian is equivalent of the Kentucky Derby, so to speak, for the thoroughbreds?
Absolutely. It is our Kentucky Derby. It's our Super Bowl. It's the most prestigious race in harness racing, and it's something that everybody that's involved in harness racing aspires to be in and then hopefully win.
And it'll be an interesting day. It's going to be the Hambletonian itself. The big race will be at 4:45 on Fox. I tune in early, 4:30 or even earlier, to catch a little bit of whatever the programming is to explain who the drivers are, the horses, a little bit of the history. And then the Oaks, which is the fillies, that will be coming up at 6 o'clock. So those are the 2 big races to watch on Cablevision. They'll be amazing. And if anyone wants to see the best of the best, this is the time to tune in.
It sure is, and as you mentioned, it'll be on Network Fox, the Hambletonian, approximately 4:45. On FS1, the Oaks will go off just a little after 6 o'clock. They're part of America's Day at the Races, so there'll be lots of thoroughbred racing in action to tune in and see on both shows.
Yeah, now there's 10 in each one of the finals, and that's it. It's limited, and I'm assuming it's filled and no one's scratching out as of right now. I know there's a draw on tomorrow, I believe, for the post position, right?
Yes, we draw both the Oaks and the Hambletonian tomorrow. We have a draw at Dr. Patty Hogan's clinic in Cream Ridge, New Jersey, and it's well attended. It's an event on the calendar for the horsemen in New Jersey, especially the people that are participating.
Now, you have an inside track, not only because of your executive position, but you've been behind a lot of these great horses. And tell us a little bit about a post position. How critical is it for these horses versus any other form of, thoroughbred racing, where post position, sometimes it's a tragedy to get the inside hole, and sometimes it's not, and same thing for the outside.
Yeah, you never know until that gate pulls whether you have a good post or a bad post, just depending on what the drivers do, what the other horses are capable of. And you always, as a driver, you always have a game plan going into the race, but it might go completely out the window 2 steps out of the gate. I think post positions is important, but when I was driving and I got a bad post, I always told myself it's only a starting point. So it kind of plays with your mind a little bit, the post position, but I think it's going to be a factor here. I mentioned TCI and Carl, but there's some other horses in there that are capable of upsetting both of them, and they race very, very well in their elimination. So I think if a couple of those horses get, Highland Kismet being one, Private Access being another, or Sig Sauer, if they happen to get really good posts, they are capable of upsetting those top.
I noticed that also the 2 winners, they get guaranteed one of the first 5 positions, because there appears to be some obvious importance to being closer to the rail than being far out.
Yes, it is. We put that clause in our conditions a number of years ago, and it's to keep the eliminations competitive. Yet sometimes drivers were a little lax. If you just finish in the top 5, there was no incentive to win. They weren't going just as hard as what we would like. With this clause in there, it's very important if you do win. And obviously you get a good post, but the more important factor is you're not going to have a bad post. So you're not going to be on the 8, 9, and 10 and really compromise your chances. So it's really an incentive for the drivers to try and win that elimination race. And it works quite well. And so those horses they're going to have an advantage with the post. They're not going to have a bad one. But at the same time, if a couple of those horses that I mentioned before happen to draw inside them, they're capable of upsetting them.
Well, I'm not a heavy gambler, but I'm sure all the networks want everyone to gamble everything they got on these races. Having said that, sometimes I'm losing my train of thought here, but sometimes there are statistics on which is the best post position or the one most likely to win. Are there such in standardbred racing?
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure just what it is this year at the Meadowlands. Usually it's between 4 and 5 wins the most races, somewhere in there.
So towards the inside, but not right on the rail.
Not right on the rail, yes.
And if you're saying if someone's a speedster and they're lucky enough, they have like the 3rd best horse in theory, and they got the rail position and they took the lead and the horse held up the whole time, that could be bad for the competitors.
It could be. I don't see that scenario. I think it'll be somebody stalking from an inside post and using that one run in the last quarter, upsetting either Carl or TCI. I don't see the other horses capable of just going to the front, cutting the mile, and holding Carl or TCI off. I think it'd be more if Carl and TCI got into a bit of a battle going to the half, that one of these other horses that wasn't used drafts along right till the last quarter would be able to zoom by and in a fast last quarter.
So basically you're saying there could be someone that's a very strong finisher that's just hanging in there waiting for that opportunity for that last put the pedal to the metal.
Yeah, I see that the big chance that's the biggest chance of one of these other horses upsetting the top 2.
Okay, let's get down to the meat a little bit. The 2 horses that are drawing the most attention, you've already mentioned them, Carl and TCI. Carl had a little bit of a setback. He lost the previous race, the Stanley Dancer Memorial, and then he bounced back and did well. And there were some changes in the training and maybe the other aspects. And TCI has continued to come forward. But you see these guys both being solid horses. They both won their elimination divisions.
Yes, they both had a couple of hiccups where they didn't win some race. Carl just one race this week, TCI a couple, but that happens. These horses, they're not machines. They just can't be on their toes and at their very best each and every start. And but their trainers, Ron Burke with TCI, Nancy Tactor with Carl, they know how to prep these horses for these races. And I know Nancy and Ron both wanted their horse to win the Stanley Dancer, but they weren't pointing them towards the Stanley Dancer. Therefore, they just weren't quite as good. Actually, it's a good time for them not to be as good. They both made adjustments on their horses after the Dancer, and it worked extremely well because they were both very impressive in the eliminations.
Now, it's interesting. I look a little bit at the breeding, and they're all Muscle Hills or Tactical Approach, which is a son of Muscle Hill, or Walner, or Chapter 7, and there's a Father Patrick. They're all, not all of them, but there's a high percent that are all within the same bloodline, so to speak.
Yeah, the cream seems to come to the top in these major Grand Circuit races, including the Hambletonian. There are leaders in the trotting, sires, and here they are. They just, year after year, those ones that you mentioned, they keep coming up with top horses.
Well, I'm going to brag here. In my earlier veterinary days, I had a little hand with a Muscle Hill when he was racing. So he turned out to. I am so proud. He's turned out to be such a super horse and such a super stallion, and I'm just proud of that whole connection and everything they did with him. I minimal part, believe me, but it was there.
I don't think you can overemphasize. He's one of the all-time greats, both on the track and in the stallion barn. He's just left a tremendous impact on the industry, and his impact is going to go on for generations and generations.
Now, I'm not doing this to tout my own horn. I'm really not, but I feel like I've been very fortunate. I picked these spots, even fortunate to get such a great interview with you, to be quite frank. But as a kid trying to get into veterinary school, I did have a hand working on Secretariat too. So I think I've touched like the best horse flesh in both those two breeds. It's pretty incredible. I've had an incredible run. It didn't bring me any fame or fortune, but it brought me tremendous memories. And I think that's what hooked me as a boy, just like I know you followed in your dad's footsteps along with your brother in the whole standardbred racing game.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. If you're next to Secretariat and Muscle Hill at any time, that there's very few people that got to do that.
Yeah, and there's a couple in the others in the list, but now I'm doing media because I enjoy the race people. I enjoy the crowd, just like you're an executive and you're in the game, you know the people, and you're not worried about what owner's going to call you the next day and go, you messed that race up, and why did you do this, and all that kind of nonsense that goes with it. So,
well, I don't miss driving, Greg, to tell you the truth. And people say, "Do you wish you were out there?" And I say, "Well, I do wish I was young enough to be out there, but my day has passed."
Well, I give you credit because you recognize your limits and you went out on top, which is really nice. Not everyone gets the opportunity to do that. You did it.
Well, I wouldn't say I was on top when I quit, but I was still doing okay. But this opportunity came along, and I'm so glad that I took it. I'm in a really good place in my life. I'm still around all the top races, the top horses. I get to see them race all the time, so I'm really enjoying it.
Okay, moving on to the next subject. Just what do you see shaping up within the Oaks, the mares or fillies, as we call them, 3-year-olds?
Well, the Oaks are a little more wide open, I would say. We did have some impressive winners. All three of the winners, Melina won her elimination, Alista Hanover, and she's a bit of just a kind of a freak. She's a chestnut filly. She's beautiful, and we don't have many chestnuts that are successful like this filly, but she's on a 10-race winning streak. And I'm partial to chestnuts myself, so I've really been following her the last couple of months. And Allegiant was won her elimination. She was very impressive as well. Smaller stables, John Butenshane trains Armelina, and Streb trains Alista Hanover, and Vernon Beachy trains Allegiant. So not household names, but it's from our standpoint with the Hambletonian Society, we're glad to see a broad spectrum of trainers and people participating in our biggest races.
All right, I'll ask you a loaded question for anyone there that's probably going to bet on either of these races. Are there any long shots that you look at, you go that they're coming under the radar? No one's really picked up on them, but if they get the right trip, they could do well in either race.
Well, Buy Around, who's maybe first or second favorite in her elimination, she finished fourth, so she qualified to get in the final. If she gets a good draw, even though she was fourth, she raced extremely well. She's got back class, and I think she's going to be overlooked in the betting a little bit. She's a filly that it certainly has the potential and the ability to upset anybody at any time.
Anything special in the Hambo? I mean, we know the two favorites, and it's highly unlikely that both of them don't fire that day. I mean, it's more probable that at least one, if not both, but they could have a speed battle and they could burn each other out, like you said, and someone who is lucky enough to draw an inside position could be sitting there and just turn on the gas pedal at the very end.
Well, I think 6 hours certainly capable of that. He actually has the fastest winning time this year, 1:50. Highland Kismet is a colt from Ontario that came down. He's just been too far back, both of his starts here into Meadowlands first. If he gets closer to the front and is anywhere within striking distance, they'll certainly be aware of him coming down the stretch because he's got a big kick finishing. And a horse named Private Access, also from Ontario, just finished second by a neck to TCI. He's a colt that I think is rounding into form and will race well on Saturday as well.
Well, I was happy to hear two of your long shots have the same trainer, and that's Noel Daly. So he puts out some good stuff. I've crossed with him in the past too. So anyway, listen, thank you so much. And if the people want to come to the Meadowlands themselves in Jersey, you have a sort of a festival around that day?
Yeah, we do. We cater to families and kids. We've got pony rides, but there's something for everybody on Hambletonian Day. We've got the backyard, which is the outdoor and picnic area. There'll be food trucks, and the races start at noon. And I encourage everybody to come out. We guarantee a good time, Greg.
We're here with an extraordinary standardbred trainer, Gregory Peck. Love the first name, Gregory. It's a great selection. You've done many things, had many accomplishments, been successful as a trainer and a driver. Your greatest accomplishment is training Muscle Hill, who went on to win the Hambletonian and win so many awards that year, Horse of the Year, and every honor just about there is. I think he amounted just shy of $3.3 million in purse winnings. And besides that, I'm going to stick my neck out, make a little comparison. I had a nice chat with John Campbell yesterday about this. He's almost to me like a Secretariat image, because not only was he a great racehorse, he's now become a super sire, both of potential stallions and mares. I did some quick statistics, and of the 10 horses racing in the Hambletonian, he sired 5 out of, or at least by lineage, been in the lineage of at least 5 out of the 10 that I could quickly pick up. And then within the Oaks, he's sired about a third of them also. So I want to congratulate you. And, I share a little bit of the glee, because years ago is how I met you. I worked on a horse that you wouldn't tell me who the horse was, or at least I looked at him and I gave you some advice, and it took you 15 years to tell me that was Muscle Hill. But I'm glad we stayed friends for all these years. So that's a long introduction, but you deserve it. And I compare you to Lucien Lauren, who trained Secretariat, had a small barn, small stable, but he made a tremendous impact on the whole racing world, and you've done the same. So welcome, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Hambo and the Oaks coming up.
Well, thank you. You're in the ballpark about his influence in the Hambletonian. There's some by him, or the tactical landing one, Carl, who will be the favorite, is by a son of Muscle Hill, Tactical Landing. So you've got that. Plus you look at the mares that, as Bob Marks, who's a close friend of mine, would say, what happens to a horse like Muscle Hill is he becomes in competition with his daughters. So the younger sires get to breed his daughters, and sometimes they, as he says, they dominate the mare and make for quite a horse. So that's what you're seeing in the Hambletonian for sure. And it's been that way the last few years.
Also in the Oaks. I mean, the Oaks, he's sired a lot of the great horses racing in the Oaks. And again, there is an interesting analogy to Secretariat, because I was there at Belmont when Bill Reed bought, who I work for, a veterinarian of acclaim, bought two of the fillies, the foals out of Secretariat, Viva Sec and Secretame, and it turned out that they were superstar horses to buy, passed on the lineage, and now there's been some studies like 3 and 4 generations later, and many of the great race horses racing today, within 1 or 2 generations, you could trace back to Secretariat. So no one recognized him as a super sire in the early days, and Muscle Hill just keeps blossoming. His get keeps getting stronger.
Well, certainly with Secretariat, yeah, it took some time, and it's maybe a generation or two back is where you see him, that's for sure. But Muscle Hill hit the ground running in the breeding shed. And I always had a theory on that I thought that he retired very, he kind of looked at me and said, well, is this it? Is it, it's over? Yeah, he wasn't tired. And if you look at the theories of Tessio, one of the things that he says that he thought the stallion should be vibrant going to the breeding shed. And Muscle Hill certainly was that. And he was, now that it's over, during a race, he was basically flawless. And he won by an average of 4.5 lengths. So that's quite a thing. We kind of haven't seen that since, really. Not every start, every time. He's had some great ones, that's for sure. And this year, frankly, the way Carl looked up until 2 weeks ago, you start to think, well, maybe here's the next one, because boy, he was winning fast, and I mean completely dominant. So, and that might change again on Saturday. We'll see. But it makes for a good race, that's for sure.
Let me throw in 2 cents to add to what you said, and then let's get back to Carl. That's an interesting story. But, I interviewed Eddie Maple, and he was a final jockey to ride Secretariat up in Canada, your home ground. He said, Doc, that horse retired as sound as any horse I've ever been on.
Right.
But your Tessio theory is accurate. There's another aspect, though, between the two breeds, where in the thoroughbreds, we don't have AI. And you, in theory, have bred many more mares in a year. So it catches up a lot more quickly in the standardbred line than in the thoroughbred line.
Especially the AI goes, dual hemisphere too. If you look at some of our stallions, like a Better's Delight, I mean, they might breed a couple hundred here and a few hundred down there. So there's an awful lot of them. But it's that they tell me the thoroughbreds have talked about limiting their books to 140 like us, but they never have. But I see that we kind of had the theory that because they don't do artificial insemination, that they bred a lot less. But the popular stallions, they certainly, they breed as many as we do. I mean, I was surprised to learn that they would breed, 150 mares a year.
Well, this is in more current times. I remember in the Secretariat era, the limit was 40 mares.
Right.
I mean, that was it. And you guys are breeding, when I say you guys, the standardbred industry is breeding 150 to 200, maybe at that time.
140, but in Ontario, there is not a limited book. And you've had a successful sire like Better's Delight. As I said, he could breed as many as he wanted, really. Yeah.
So, but the thoroughbreds figured a way to catch up in numbers because, let's face it, the world is run by finance. And the more breedings you do, the greater the return on the investment. Having said that, let's look at the Hambo itself. And for many of my listeners or viewers who only follow some of the cream of the crop sports like the Hambletonian, the Oaks, the Belmont, the Travers, the Polo World Championships, they follow just the cream of the crop of what's happening. This is a very great year, and I want you to size up. There's 2 superstars in the Hambo that have only met. I think they met once before, and that is Carl and TCI. And why don't you tell me quickly the rundown on what's with these 2 superstars that are both favored to win, although any day any horse could win.
Well, what happened is to start with TCI, what he was your quintessential Cantab Hall, that he just stayed trotting and he did things, the same thing all the time, but he even made a break and beat them, which was kind of hard to believe, really. And I think a couple of weeks ago he did the same thing. He made a break, but he came home and got third or something like that. But he's really been a handy horse. Burks, always come up with a good showing, like they know what they're doing. You have Ronnie's around, you have Shannon Murphy, who's from Cape Breton like I am, and Margaret Gillen, the groom. She has taken care of the Atlantas of the world, and many more. So you have that. Then on the Tactor side, well, he's won lots of Hamiltonians, and Nancy has done a terrific job, because I laugh at people when they say, well, Nancy, she got it all from Jimmy. Well, I say, I can remember Nancy working very hard as a groom. I saw her sleeping outside a stall. So, she got lucky because she worked hard too. There's no doubt about it. There's lots of people who could maybe, be passed over something like that and not do so well. So you have those two teams who will be really trying to get the horse the very best that day. And as big as stables that they are, you have to admire them. They get around to them. There's no doubt about it, and they'll be ready to go come Saturday.
Yeah, so it should be an exciting race. Those two, again, for the anyone listening, Carl and TCI right now are probably the favorites, and then there's several others that are in there. The post positions are being decided today, and that might have an influence. Again, via John Campbell yesterday, he said he always viewed it, and he's probably one of the most successful drivers of all times. He said that was just his starting point for the race.
That's what he says. Yeah.
He had to deal with whatever post position they gave him, but he did say that generally the not on the rail, but just off the rail, I think the 4-5 somewhere in that hole generally yields the best results, and we see that also statistically with the thoroughbred racehorses.
Yeah, the Irony Muscle Hill was in those years. You could choose 1, 2, 3. There was 3 eliminations, and Explosive Matter picked first, picked 2, and I picked 1. And I did the same thing with Holiday Road. I picked second and picked 1. A lot of people don't want 1, but I'll take 1 anytime I can get it. That's for sure. But they've changed it this year. I think they draw, don't they, 2 to 6 or something. It goes like that. That they've kind of changed the draw.
They go 1 to 5 this year. Anywhere
1 to 5 this year.
1 to 5. But I was unaware. I didn't get to ask that question whether you could pick the 1 of 5 you want, or it's just the luck of the draw. Whichever 1 to 5 you get, you get.
Well, in the Meadowlands Pace, they did it. I thought it was 2 to 6, and whatever one you got, you got. Yeah, it wasn't like you picked first and then you chose.
Right.
So yeah, they've kind of what they've kind of done is try to make it so that the eliminations are more exciting, because we've always been criticized of the fact that they say that they don't try as hard in the eliminations because they're just trying to get qualified for the final. So what they've done by doing the draw the way they've done it gives them incentive for the eliminations to be more competitive. Yeah, that's what's happened there.
So other than Carl and TCI, are there any horses in there in particular? Not that I'm going to ask.
Well, you have the horse from Ontario. They have been talking about him, and he closed in well the other night. Then you had one who was a very hot driver, in James McDonald, who sat in behind TCI and was right there at the wire. You have that one. You have the one that was second to Carl, and then you just, you kind of never know, but it does seem historically that if you have a heavy favorite, they get there. But now I don't know, because so you're kind of, if you look at the years of the Muscle Hills, and you went back the other years of the Dewey Cheatham and Howe and the Donato Hanovers, they seem to be standouts, in the Hambletonian worked out that way. Where this year, again, up until the second last start, Carl looked to be the same thing. I mean, he was winning from here to the length of the stretch, and he was really doing it easily. So maybe he'll come back to that again. I see they made a few shoeing adjustments, and they seem to know what to do, come Hambletonian Day.
And also, it's possible that these two superstars of the race at this particular moment, if they enter and they perform the way they're expected to perform, if they challenge each other for the lead and they, I wouldn't say burn out, but if they use all their speed that way, there could be some lucky third individual sitting there and just coasting along behind them that all of a sudden come towards the finish wire, decides to put on the gas and has something left in the tank that they could slide in there. So we just never know.
No,
And
we never do know. I know
Yeah,
one thing.
go ahead.
It's a lot of fun to be in, and you don't take it for granted. So I must say, I miss being in it. And I had one last year that got injured, and I just very quickly, a lot of people know that I've suffered from depression and been kind of out of it for over a year. And I noticed I'm not the only one, and it's a disease. And for anybody out there that I have said something that I should not have, it's not an excuse, but it's a reason. Probably why I did some things that I should not have done, and I apologize about that. And so I'm working along with that, and hopefully at some point I'll come back around. But first, I've got to get healthy.
Well, I'm sure you will. I've known you for many years. I've always known you to be a stand-up type of guy. What you said was your word, and on and on. And I understand a little bit about chemical imbalances and a little bit about addictions, and I think they're all in one big sphere. And I have some friends and it's prevalent in the racing world, especially. Thank God you're not also dealing with alcoholism. But
Well, yeah, I'm fortunate there. That's right.
But there's many of them. Many of them get into that or some of the drugs these days, and it's a tough lifestyle. Listen, even as a veterinarian, it's been a tough lifestyle. It's not the most wholesome way to grow up.
A lot of work. A lot of work.
Oh, tremendous work. And then
24/7 type of thing.
I'm going to tie back to Nancy Tachter, who deserves so much credit because, like you said, she's not one of the spoiled kids who grew up with under the shadow of a father who did well. And
they tried that on her, but I saw it firsthand. That is not the case. That's right. Yeah.
And I've seen many prominent families in all racing worlds that the torch doesn't necessarily get handed down just because of genetics or lineage. So she deserves everything. In fact, I wanted to also bring up that she won the Hambletonian last year with a tactical approach sire who was the son of Muscle Hill again. So, it's all connected.
Tactical landing was a different type of sire. It kind of took him a few crops, which can happen to get good. And now he's gone from the first year they were just so on him to that's not the way now. He's really, really done well. That's for sure. It's great stuff.
So without belaboring the point much more, what do you see happening? The Oaks, just so people know, the Oaks is strictly for fillies or mares, and the Hambo, it's open to all horses. Once in a while, we do get some mares that race in there, but the Oaks is specifically uniquely for fillies and mares.
Well, you have an interesting one in there. Mm-hmm. And she's a chestnut, and she was purchased by an owner who kind of was a groom years ago. Lynn Curry got back in the business, and he's been buying trotting fillies and giving them to Annie Stobie. They've done extremely well. I mean, it's let's say that they've bought 10 over the last few years. It seems that I think 9 of them were pretty good, and so that filly is quite a filly, and she's a international money, which is Antonacci, your friends, out of a Dewey and Cheatham and Howe mare. So it's not something you would think of. Then in our business, we think, well, with chestnuts, they're not as good or grays. Where in the thoroughbred business, there's lots of colors. Where the standardbred is typically bay. It seems so. So that makes the Oaks pretty interesting. Is that filly?
Yeah, no, at least in Hanover is Dave Miller. You're correct.
That's the one.
Annie Stobe, or I may be mispronouncing it, but
Stobie, yeah.
Stobie. I apologize. These names after a while, it's crazy. But I did my homework, and I'm glad to know that the Antonaccis had a hand in there.
They always do. I mean, that they're historically, they've been the breeders, and they put a lot into the business. I mean, they really, let's face it. I know they call him Frank the Elder, but I still don't look at him as the Elder. But Frankie Jr. and, Frank, what I would call Frankie Jr. actually was a very good horse trainer. He was second in the Hambletonian with Crazed to Dewey, Cheatham and Howe. And then he decided, he went into the recycling business. And so you don't see him around as much. But it is a very storied family. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I don't know if there'd be a Hambletonian without them, it seems.
Oh, I agree with you. I agree with you. I go back to Sonny Antonacci. era and all the great horses he had, and it's transposed or transpired through several generations. They're all wonderful people. They're all hardworking people. Nothing's given to them by accident. Again, a similar analogy to Tactor and his daughter. And I was introduced to you by the cousins, the Lomonginos, when you had a few horses you had some questions about. They brought me in to see if I had any ideas for you. But enough kudos to those guys, and you're right. I think if they were out of the industry, they would be sorely missed. So I'm going to look more carefully now at this, at least in Hanover. Now that you mentioned it.
Oh, very impressive. Yeah.
Any
Very
other
impressive, very pretty too.
any other surprises within the Oaks or going back to the Hambo that we should be aware of that you wanted to mention?
Well, the James McDonald has been hot, and what's the one that he's on?
You got to give me the race, my friend.
Well, the Hambletonian.
The Hambo, or back to the
Yeah.
Hambo. Oh, he's
Yeah.
on Private Access, another Muscle Hill horse.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, and he was a good close second last week. So you have that one. You just maybe he's getting better coming into it. But as a rule, unless something unpredictable happens, it's usually the favorites are involved most of the way or all the way, and then you see from there.
Okay, I think if I remember, John Campbell mentioned Sig Sauer might be a possible horse too.
Yeah, and he's a Muscle Hill.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and he was closing in good the other day. Yeah, that's
I
right.
warn everyone, I'm not the guy you want to go to for statistics and odds and bets, but you could look
But
up.
you're picking up some good stuff.
But I'm giving you my insight from the backside, and there's much more to be learned on the Hambo site and on the Hambletonian and on the Meadowlands and listening to some of these interviews. But it's going to be a great day this coming Saturday on the 3rd, and it's going to be a country festival type of deal with the broadcast later in the evening. But for Standardbred time, it's early because generally you guys race at night. So It's well worth it going out. And if not, watching on TV, it'll be covered on the racing networks. They're going to simulcast back and forth between Thoroughbred and Standardbred. So it should be exciting.
Fox Sports, huh?
Yeah, on Fox. So I thank you very much for your insight. I think you're one of the most knowledgeable people in the industry. I think you got a storied career, and you are a legend, whether you know it or not. And you just take care of yourself. And we appreciate your honesty on everything. And again, I'll be looking for you at the next Hambletonian next year.
Thank you very much, Doc.
Welcoming Billy O'Donnell, one of the most outstanding Standardbred harness drivers in the history of the sport, Hall of Fame member. I think he did it about 38 years, started around 1979, believe it or not, Saratoga, and you might have done something before then. And you announced retirement in 2017 along with a fellow competitor, John Campbell, which is an amazing story unto itself. Anyone wants to learn more about you, they should look it up, because I could read your Wikipedia. We could be here for a half hour. I'm not going to do it. But I will say that you've already won the Hambletonian with Praxis in 85. Yeah. You won the Hambletonian Oaks with Fancy Crown in 84. You were very well known for all your work with Pacers, and you made a name for yourself with Nihilator, son of Niatros, in 84. And you sort of set a new tone for Standardbred racing in that Billy Houghton, who himself was a great driver and trainer, hired you to be his driver because he thought you'd do a better job with that horse. You were the first guy to make like $9 million in 84 and $10 million in 85. And you retired with 5,743 career wins and just shy of $100 million in earnings. So you're certainly the man we want to talk to find out about this upcoming Hambo and Oaks, and we appreciate your time, and congratulations for such a splendid career and being a stand-up individual.
Thank you very much, Doc. It's good to be here.
Let's start with the Hambo itself. That's an interesting race. I did speak with Greg Peck the other day, and we had a hand on Muscle Hill, which I took it interesting just on the sire line side itself. 50% of the horses are descendants of Muscle Hill, and I'm sure if I looked into the female side, there'd be even more. And then on the Oaks, which is the fillies version, 1/3 were the statistics for the sire line side, and then who knows if we added in all the females. It'd be interesting to do a study, but that's how much of an impact has been from Muscle Hill, who Greg Peck was a trainer and brought that horse to Hall of Fame standards. Yeah. So there's two horses that are touted as being the potential superstars in this upcoming race, and that's Carl and TCI. You have any comments about either one of them, your opinion about these two superstars, and everyone else can also be, or could it be anyone's race?
Well, I think, like you said, they are superstars, both those horses. And the two times or three times I think they only hooked up last year was, I think, was 2-1 for Carl, I think. He won two, and TCI won one of them. But there's a few in there. There's a horse called Highland Kesmet up in Canada here that's really opened everybody's eyes here this spring, and he raced really well last week. He came his last quarter 26-1 off a mile and 152, and he got back. He was fourth over. Anyway, he won a big race, and he's won. And another one is Noel Daly's colt, Sig Sawyer. He's a real deal too. He's been off a bit, and but he really come alive there. 2 weeks ago, he went in 150, and I think it's going to be a pretty good race myself. But if they got the outside, which will help anyway, kind of set the race up a little bit better than just two of them lining up 1, 2, 3. So it'll. I think. No,
I don't have the post positions. You do. Yeah. I did most of my research before, and I know they were given out yesterday.
Yeah.
And John Campbell also touted 6 Hour as being maybe an outside horse to take a good solid look at it. Also, he felt comfortable about that. As far as post positions, from a driver's perspective, I know in thoroughbred racing there are statistics on which is the best hole to be in, and John seemed to feel, he didn't know a number, but he said the 4 or 5 position is generally the best. Sometimes some people don't like to be on the inside. Greg Peck said, if I got the one position, I always take it. What's your view of that?
I think both sides. I look at both sides of it. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and that's the rail, hopefully. But 3, 4, 5 are the spots to be. 2 are very good spots. You got more choices that way. With the rail, you've got 1 or 2 choices. Just head them out of there fast, and that might take its toll on them late in the race, or take your chance and go away slow and hopefully you can get back out in the outer tier if you got a favorite or one of the ones that belong. Where the 3 or 4, you can just stay where you're at and just kind of watch what's going on. And you can make things happen if you get the 3 or 4.
Interesting. Now, what happens on the draw, the horses that won the eliminations, they get put into a pool which they're guaranteed to be in the first 5
right.
When pulled, but they don't get to select the exact position they want.
Correct. Yeah, they draw for who draws first, and I guess I don't know who did. I wasn't watching the draw, but I see Carl has the rail, and TCI is the other favorite. He has the 4. So, and Sig Sawyer, he says the 8, which is not an ideal position, but you got to do with what you got to do, right? So.
Well, Campbell summed it up the other day, and he said to me, I whatever position I get, that's the starting point of the race for me. That's it.
That's it. It's not where you finish, right? It's where you start. It's not where you start, it's where you finish. Well,
that's been my motto for all my life.
Yeah.
I've got a lot further than I ever thought I'd get, to be honest with you, and I'm sure you too.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. I'm doing also the Olympics, a little bit of coverage for that. And when I was talking to Joe Fargas the other day, he says you almost want to pinch yourself. You wake up and it's been a dream to be in the Olympic arena, and there you are. And from that point on, then it's all business. You just got to concentrate on winning your event.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that'll be this week. That'll be lots of tape and watching for me too. With with the show jump. I like the show jump. I like the 3-day eventing. My son did a little bit of that when he was young, and it was cross country. He got lost. We had to go looking for him, so he never wanted to do that again. So I remember when I first get into it when he was young, and I thought he was doing okay, and he got 5th and he got 6th. So I said to his coach, I said, I didn't know the difference between Jumper and Hunter. So I said, what's the difference between Hunter and Jumper? She said, well, Hunter this and that, and the Jumper's clean round fastest time. I said, that's for us, that one. No judging involved, just plain statistics.
Well, that's a good part about the race game. Whoever crosses the wire first crosses the wire and wins. It's not a matter of a judge deciding whether you were the better competitor.
Exactly.
That's the hard part.
Yeah.
So we pretty much discussed a little bit about the Hambo, and also now you educated us on the Olympics coming up a little bit here. What about the Oaks? What do you think's coming up there?
Well, that was a very good race too. And there's 4 or 5 in here that can win the race. The Legion was, obviously she'll be one of the favorites, where she won last week. Warwick Michelle raced really well, but the one for me, and she has a bad post, but Dexter's going to have to work some magic in there for sure, is Dateline Hanover. She's been really getting good lately, and she got the 9. And the one thing about that, she got another good one on the outside of her. So that'll be the race of the day, I think. This one here. So
I'm hearing a little bit of buzz on Armelina, and
yeah, she was very good. Yeah, Armelina was very good. Those, I don't know what I would say that, but that race was. It was kind of lackadaisical half too. They just kind of went along slow. There wasn't much action, and left Armelina with a lot of trot at the end, which she earned it. I mean, she got some respect after what she's done, all this year and last year. So that's the most competitive race of the day, I think. That race.
So you say most competitive, meaning that it's going to be a tight bunch and anything could happen.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. There's 4 or 5 in there that really have a big shot of winning. Even Elise de Hanover, she shows nothing but winning, right? And just she's had 11 starts this year and 10 wins. She's not well known, but she's winning. And she jogged.
Yeah, and that was one of Greg Peck's favorites, Elise de Hanover.
Yeah, she went pretty good. Yeah, she looked very good. So
he thought that filly mare seems to have a great shot at it.
Yeah. So
anyway, that's for anyone that's in the gambling end, which I'm not. I'm in the story end. I like the stories behind it, and I'm not a big throw down your money and see what happens kind of guy. But anyway, that's you got a little bit of a tout for anyone that's in the gambling end of where where their interest should be.
Exactly.
I'm going to switch back gears a little bit to the Hambo, only because I wanted to mention that Nancy Tactor won last year, the Hambo. And, she's always in the mix, and she's always got a shot, and she's the one that's training this horse, Carl.
Yeah.
So we'll see. At the beginning of the year, he was such a big potential superstar. Only had a setback once, I believe. And we'll see if he repeats his previous performance. And he's a son of Tactical Landing, which is the son of Muscle Hill.
Yeah.
So for my money, probably I'm repeating what everyone should obviously know, that he's the favorite with TCI sitting right in the shadow there.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, you look down there and you see the Muscle Hill. You're right. It's all over, isn't it? Everywhere.
What a prolific stallion. And again, part of my conversation with Peck was, it took years for us to figure out what a superstar secretariat was besides his own race career. He was a broodmare sire at first known, and then slowly but surely a few of his sons started kicking in.
Yeah.
But when you look back at the overall breeding histories and you go back 1, 2, 3, 4 generations, he's almost in every one of the superstars of today. Yeah, and that's not considering the broodmare side as much. And I didn't do the stats. It'd be interesting. I'd like to do that one day. Take the stats on the standardbred side and look at the broodmares and see how many times Muscle Hill is there, like a daughter of Muscle Hill, or a granddaughter of Muscle Hill.
I get interested in when they bring these horses over from Japan for the Breeders' Crowns or the big races, like mostly aged horses. Every one of them, without exception, go back to Sunday Silence and Northern Dancer. Every one. It's unbelievable.
Yes.
Go back, we look it up on Equibase there and go, wow, again and again and again. You know, and you'd be surprised how many, knowing Sunday Silence, how many look like him. Big dark horses, like, big black horse with a little white on their face and stuff, right? So and with the Secretary, the same way. Northern Dancer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in the early days said that he would never turn out to be any kind of stallion.
Yeah.
I was sitting with Bill Reed at his side, the veterinarian that I worked for at the time, when he bought the two of the first daughters of Secretary, Viva Sec and Secretane.
Right.
And, I don't know why a stallion would be known necessarily as a sire of sire or a broodmare sire. I think if you've got the talent and ability with the right breedings and the right crosses, it'll come out. As a veterinarian, I got to work on a horse deputy minister, and he's all over the breeding lines everywhere, especially in the female side. But I think some of it is a little bit of, my personal opinion, luck. The first few seasons, if you score with some big colts, all of a sudden everyone says he's going to be a sire. And if you don't, then they have to wait and skip a generation. But Secretariat was a unique foal in that Bold Ruler wasn't known to be a sire of sire. He's more of a broodmare sire until within the last two crops came Secretariat.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he became, wow, you could do that. So
a guy in our industry, Norm Hall, he's a pedigree expert. I remember he did an article on stallions, and it was Bettor's Delight, he's probably arguably the greatest sire in our business, now, currently. And he said that he's an anomaly because after 3 to 4 generations, they peter out like the sires, right? So, but he was 5th generation, but a great sire. Now his sons so far haven't bred on; they're not so good yet. But maybe, like you say, it'll skip a generation, come back, and whether they will or not, who the heck knows? But strange how stuff like that happens. You drive yourself crazy, with that breeding stuff. There's no end to it, right? It just goes on.
I have good friends in the standardbred industry that are into the breeding. At the end of the day, got a headache because this one was related to this, and the second cousin crossed over that way, and on and on and on. Yeah. But you're right, and sometimes it's important, and sometimes it's not the most important thing in the world. Yeah. Just like we talked off the air about your background, my background, and neither of us came from superstar individuals within the professions we're in.
Yeah.
And but I do think that you have to have a competitive heart. And I think you have to have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder to want to prove to the world that you can do what you want to do.
Well, especially with horses, that's what I always said about horses. You can look at them conformation wise. You can do all kinds of things, but you don't know what's inside of that heart. The desire, and with Nihilator and Secretary, just a little bit of comparison, which is really none. But there was somebody, he was doing heart monitor, like the size of your heart, right? However right. You phrase it at Lexington. So they put the mechanism on the Nihilator, and they jogged him 3 miles, and the guy had his computer there, and he's punching away, and the paper's coming out, and he's tearing it off, trying it again. And he said, I've probably done 4,000 thoroughbreds with this machine and about 200 standardbreds. This horse has the second largest heart that I ever did. He said, and the biggest one was John Henry at that point. So, and they rated him. Our horse was 4.0, and John Henry was 4.2. So
thank you for sharing that, because we're supposed to be talking about standardbred racing, but this is history. No, and it's critical and it's important. I've never heard that before, and even as a veterinarian. And maybe I'll have a panel one day talk about horse sizes, heart sizes, and you'll be on it, because there was a little bit of controversy this year and comments made about Secretariat, and his performance was more than just his heart. But I don't want to go into that with today's interview with you.
I heard that, and I never heard that until maybe 5 years ago, right? And said, "Oh, what you're going to say?" And went, "You know what? Or maybe I don't know. I have no idea." But anyway,
Well, you're talking to one of the guys that's still alive that actually worked on that horse,
yeah.
and so I could tell you that it was all straight business. There was nothing outside the normal of racetrack care for that horse at the time. And I was even asked by Penny Tweedy if I had ever seen or heard anything like that, and I said, "No, ma'am, I was there." And there was 3 guards around us every time we worked on the horse. So, anything's possible in today's world, and anything is likely, and anything could happen.
Yeah.
But listen, I didn't look at every racehorse that was in racing against him that day, and I didn't look at it that year, and on and on and on. Just like with Annihilator, all I could say is that size of heart probably has something to do with it. There's more to that story, and maybe one day it would be good for us to discuss. We'll have a panel and discuss that story because it's an interesting story. But I want to thank you so much, Billy, only because my interviews are short and to the point,
Okay.
but it was critically important because you're a historian now. You're a legendary historian. You know the game, you know where it came from, and you know where it's going. And I'm sure you're going to enjoy this excitement on Hambletonian weekend.
I'm like a friend of mine, Lou Martinez. I don't know if you knew Lou.
I know.
He always says, "I'm a student of the game," he said. That's what he used to say. And he was. He really was. For a guy that was from Long Island and he wasn't a horse guy per se. His dad was a barber at the racetrack. That's how he got started around the track, which is.
And his son became a veterinarian working on the thoroughbred track, I believe, in Maryland.
Yeah, Nick did. Yeah. He worked on Barbaro, I think. Wasn't it that time when
Barbaro, the first one. And then Dean Richardson, another veterinarian, is the one that got the call at New Bolton, who I was residence with Dean. He was then chief of surgery by the time he got that call. But for those that are watching, there's so much history and there's richness in the history of the sport because people that just tune in don't understand it. So I don't want to cut us short. Maybe we'll do a little history one day, and it would be good to get a few people shooting well, I don't want to say it. There'll be a few people discussing it, but the point is that I appreciate your input, and I think this adds to the flavor of this show.